Hello, everybody. Tara here with a Wifey Wake Up, No Makeup podcast. Today we're talking about love. Of course, when we're talking about marriage, we are going to talk about love. But today is more of a contemplation, and that is to ask yourself, do you actually know how to love? And this question came to me when, of course, John and I were having issues, and eventually I was like, I wonder, do I actually know how to love? Because what I was perceiving is what I thought was loving him, he wasn't getting it, right? He was directly saying, I just don't feel that you want me or are connecting with me. And it was through comments like those. Again, I've said many times, I'm very grateful that he's aware of himself and can communicate those things. Otherwise, we would just continue to drift apart. And so I started wondering, do I actually know how to love? And what's interesting is I think we all assume that we know how to love when we fall in love, because it's a default, right? We fall in love and we're like, oh, it's automatic. I know how to love. But the reality is you know how to fall in love. That's an automatic reflex. But when you've been married for years and even decades, we're going on 2.5 decades now, you realize, wow, there's so many more aspects to love. And I don't just mean like the different words for love in other languages, like Greek, for example. I mean the different ways that it comes across to the person you say that you love. So what became very apparent during those times, and still, is that I knew how to love based upon how I perceived love and how I grew up. And how you grow up, I think, largely shapes what you think love looks like. I don't think that's not novel, right? I'm sure you've heard that. But what today's podcast is more about taking this idea with you and just contemplating a bit or a lot of how this applies to your life. So, for example, many people have heard about the 5 love languages. Love it, hate it, whatever. Just contemplate this for a moment. So that was a book that fortunately we came across fairly early in our marriage, and it really resonated a lot for me and my husband. We had easily identified our love languages, and we were also among a group of couples, and you could quickly see also that kind of being used against one another, like, you're not providing my love language. So just a heads up there, because this is a part of how do you know how to love. So going back a step, one of my husband's, his primary love language really is physical touch. And it seems pretty obvious to me. He even remembers as a kid his mom rubbing his back at night. Or I think it was actually both of his parents. They would take turns until he fell asleep. And I think he probably resisted going to sleep for a very long time because of that. But it makes sense that that would be how he learned to perceive love, and therefore carries that forth into adulthood. And for me, that was not really a predominant love language in my family of upbringing. And so it was not as familiar to me. It wasn't an automatic reflex, while he would just love if my hands were all over him all day. And so that really took a concerted effort for me, still takes a concerted effort for me to be aware that for him to perceive love is through touch. And of course, it's the opposite. If there are touches that are maybe if they're self-conscious about their belly, or for example, that if there's any kind of teasing in that area, that can work so much in the opposite direction as well. So it's important to know both ends of the spectrum there. So I really strive to make an effort to touch him as often as reasonably possible. So whether in the morning it's making sure he gets a hug, and this is not just like checking it off the list. It also has to come from the heart. And if you're wondering more about where do I kind of dig it up, how do I keep that love tank going after so many years, just comment in the comments. I'd like to hear more. And no shame, because after especially a decade of marriage, your love shifts. It can still be delightful, amazing, but life changes. And so you need to be deliberate about it as well. So examples, in the morning, I make sure he gets a hug, a genuine, holding each other for a little bit. When I pass him in the kitchen or wherever it may be, maybe he's sitting at the table, I'll, touch him in some way, whether it's across his back, his lower back, or his shoulders, or even just spend a few minutes rubbing his head or massaging his shoulders a bit. It doesn't have to be a full-on stand there for 20 minutes massage. That's what I used to think. I used to have these defenses thinking if I start this, it's going to have to go all the way, right? All the way somewhere. And we had some good talks about this. He was thankfully able to relay this information that, when it's few and far between, yes, the desire is to want to get as much as possible in that moment. But when it's more often, it is just those gestures of love that help keep that love tank topped off. Another time is when he comes home. Now, we work on the same property, we have businesses on the same property. So it might just be, kind of at the end of the day, he's coming upstairs. I work from home upstairs, and just taking that moment to greet him. And there are so many times in between. We're in the car, I'm touching his arm, we're on the couch, rubbing his feet. And these are ways that I can show that I love him. Again, right? We're married. I have no problem with acts of service as well. I think that when you love someone, serving them is a pleasure. It ought to be a pleasure if you truly love someone. So that's just one example, and that's illustrating the love language of physical touch. And it doesn't take you being a believer of the love languages or not. I think that's really, really practical. And you can quickly understand how that works. Another way that you might notice this also is, and this is usually where I think couples, or when you have a relationship that's really struggling, particularly if someone who is not aware and is even, we'll just say not aware. Have you ever had someone say, but I love you? And in your mind, or it comes out your mouth, you're like, well, what you just did or said doesn't feel or sound like love. Okay, those are really big points to listen to. Those are big aha moments. And what that person is telling you, hopefully they're giving you some good sound feedback, is that what you just did does not feel good. It could be, let's go back to the example with my husband. If I was teasing him about a certain area of his body that he's self-conscious about, and I would say, but I'm touching you, I thought you wanted to be touched. And it was clearly not, or it was kind of disguised as a teasing sort of gesture. He ought to tell me that didn't feel like love. It felt like you were teasing me. And it seems so basic, right? Like the number one thing that people say that is essential for marriage is communication. And I know people are like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing it. It's about communication. That's why I'm giving you these examples. This is an example where a person, husband or wife, needs to be able to say, that didn't feel like love. It felt like actually you were teasing me, and I love being touched. But when you touch me in that way, it actually feels like you're teasing me, and that feels the opposite of love. And so this is extremely important, particularly you want to be able to talk about these things before it becomes an issue and just starts dividing you. Oh, I could say so much more, but I'm just going to wrap it up there. So to end with, a good way to open this up, no matter where you're at, it is honestly going to be more challenging if you've already been butting heads and having issues, but it is still possible to get back on track with this one exercise. And that is plan some time, let him or her know, hey, Saturday morning, let's spend 45 minutes. I have a question for you that I'd like you to think about from now until then. And that is, how do you perceive that I love you? How do you know, how and when do you know that I love you? In what ways do I show that to you? And you can give them, the 5 languages is a great way to start that conversation out as well. Even if you just list off the 5 love languages. and give that person time to think. And then when you sit down, make sure you sit and listen and take notes. Don't defend, don't explain. You could ask questions, but be careful that your questions aren't inquisitive, like, if he's telling me, maybe it comes from my parents when I was really little would rub my back at night, and I think that helps me to feel loved. And I can't even think of a snide comment, but if you're going to have questions, make sure that they're out of curiosity and out of love, that you truly want to know and understand. And I would suggest, highly recommend that that's the only time that you interject and speak. Let them speak, let them explain, and answer questions that are from the heart, that are with love, true love, again, that's what they're perceiving, and that you're listening way more than talking, even if you're asking questions, because you don't want it to be an interrogation as well. And again, don't justify, explain, and reason your way, especially like I have an amazing mother-in-law, but I could see how if you didn't have a great mother-in-law, that could be a trigger as well. So you need to control yourself, and you are there for your loved one and to have a great ongoing relationship, so that you can have a relationship where you both not only feel like the love that you are giving is being 100% received, it's being soaked up, and so you don't feel like it's being overlooked as well. I would love to hear how your conversations go. Maybe that might be a bit much for the comments, but would love to hear how that goes. Please even put your questions in the comments that I can address in a future podcast, for example. And of course, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If someone came to mind, you're like, wow, this could really help someone. Or maybe you propose to your spouse, hey, let's do this weekend. Please send it their way. Take care, everybody. Love you. Bye-bye.